Here we are.
Hey guys.
We're live.
Oh, hey.
Cool. Nice background, Emily.
Thanks, Duke.
So where are we at today? What are we looking at?
So I got
Me?
this weird
Well, hold on.
comment.
I'm going to share my screen.
Cool.
Okay.
So I got this weird comment. Well, not weird, interesting comment, I should say, from an advertisement that I was running because I'm selling masks. And what was interesting about it is that the comment on the advertisement for the masks said something really interesting that I'll read for you guys and then would love to hear your thoughts on. So the comment was this: okay, if that's what you want to believe, but masks, also cause oxygen deprivation to the brain and cause you to rebreathe carbon dioxide, a waste product. They also cause bacterial pneumonia, which no one wants to speak of because they can't break the narrative. But you do you, and I'll breathe fresh air and oxygen rather than a warm, moist waste product to make myself sick with this.
Wow.
Whoa.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So the question there is, does wearing a mask cause CO2 poisoning?
Oxygen deprivation to the brain, which is interesting.
I don't even know.
Let's be real. I mean, they have a point. Wearing a mask does kind of suck sometimes because you smell your breath. And I don't know about you, but I just had a bagel with onion, and it definitely did not feel good wearing a mask after that. And the moisture is real.
I was on my bike and had the same experience the other day. But well, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I also I think this is really interesting because I empathize with this too, but there's this really visceral emotional content to the end of this email, which is that warm, moist waste product. And I really love that and sympathize with it. And it is such an emotional reaction. I get that too when I'm out, especially on a cold day. And I come back inside and the mask is just saturated with my breath. It's gross. It's totally gross. I get it.
Yeah, no, I think it makes complete sense. I guess the question that I have though is how long and how often would you have to wear a mask for the carbon dioxide buildup to be such that you would actually have oxygen deprivation?
Well, I think those are two separate things, right? Those are actually, and they also say bacterial pneumonia in here, which I think is interesting. So it's almost like three things. It's like bacterial pneumonia, oxygen deprivation, and carbon dioxide.
Wait, what are you looking at? Oh, you're reading.
I'm reading the comment.
The comment. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So there's three things. I'm wondering if we start instead of starting with CO2 poisoning, because that that's a new chemical or whatever. Let's just talk about oxygen for a sec and oxygen deprivation, because that one's really, I think, the most
oxygen deprivation.
And also, let's use our common sense. Even
before Googling, let's try
COVID, who wore masks the longest? It was surgeons doing heart and brain surgery. And I'm sure that wearing a mask for the 10 hours that you have doing brain surgery, it can't be that bad. It's not like surgeons are passing out over their patients while they're doing surgeries. So it can't be horrible for you because you have to play at a super high level. So how long surgeons, wear masks for, right? How long does a surgeon wear a mask?
I will say, as I'm searching that, just to cut you off there for a second, sorry to interrupt, is that I have seen some really interesting, or I keep using interesting. It's not interesting. I've seen some pretty scary photos of, surgeons that wear a mask, and it does leave a, I certainly get it when I wear a bike ride. I'm on a bike ride. I get a sort of a thing on my face, but that's not what we're talking about here.
That's a rash. What really, we don't even really need to Google oxygen deprivation, to Amelie's point, because she's right. Surgeons wear masks for hours and hours and hours at a time, day after day after day, and they have to function at a super high level, and they're fine. So I think just logically we can say, the risk of oxygen deprivation as even wearing masks for hours and hours and hours at a time, not a big deal.
Right. But the question of the carbon dioxide buildup,
that one's more interesting.
That's
more interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a good So how long do surgeons wear a mask? So let's find a source for that. What about this Quora article here? How effective are face masks in operation theater?
Oh, interesting. How is it, that was a different one that I found. Okay, how effective are?
No, like how long does a surgeon wear a mask for?
Yeah, that's where I was at. I
No, I was
thought.
looking, I'm just looking for an article.
Oh, okay. I think there was this. Let's see. I saw the Quora.
So you should add long. How long does a surgeon?
Oh, right. How long? Because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about long.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's,
Okay. Okay. Pre-COVID-19 pandemic, surgical masks were put on when entering the sterile areas of the operating room and removed when leaving those areas. A surgeon does not touch their face at all when wearing a mask. Okay, that's interesting.
You wear them all day. But I guess like, okay, if doctors can do brain surgery in a mask for 10 hours, that's probably fine to go to the grocery store for an hour. It's not going to damage you. So let's maybe think, I think my non-surveillance Amazon Alexa is shouting at me. So while you all figure this out, I'm gonna go handle my electronics.
Yeah, BRB.
Great. So okay, so I think we can say surgeons wear masks for hours and hours at a time, and they don't touch anything, and they never take it off, right? And it's to protect themselves, but also the person who's in surgery, and so that seems to not be a problem. But let's move on to the CO2
Got
question.
it.
I think that's right. Yeah, I think that's pretty interesting, as to say, okay, is CO2 a problem? And so what do we want to look for there? Like how much CO2 can you breathe? Like what's the?
What about what is carbon dioxide poisoning?
Yeah, that's great. Let's start there.
What is it? We're just talking about, like, we want to know what it feels like to get carbon dioxide poisoning. I mean, is that what we're exploring here? Like, what are the symptoms? Like, if I have it, this is what I should be aware of.
I think what I'm interested in is, like, is it a thing? Like, can you get carbon dioxide poisoning? Like, I don't even know if that's a thing. I just sent you a link, a link in the chat, because I found something that's pretty cool. So I think it's just like, is it a thing? And like, what is it? Like, how are we getting, does it exist? Like, is this a made up thing? Like, I don't know.
And also, like, all this stuff about like CO2 poisoning really only came up since COVID and mask wearing. So, how severe is this problem?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's
I mean, I've
question.
ridden, like I said earlier, I've ridden a bike for many hours and worn a mask and haven't
Passed out and died.
Yeah, I haven't died is what I was gonna say. I haven't died, but I was gonna be generous. Like, I haven't felt sick even. I felt hungry, I felt thirsty, but I haven't felt sick as a result of riding my bike.
So let's look at this. This article is really nice. Let's first of all, when was it published?
Wait, hold on. How does one look at an article like this? Where do I go? What do you want me to look for?
Well, the first thing I want to check is when was it published? Because we
okay.
was just mentioning. So 2017. It's well before the pandemic, right? We didn't know it existed. It has nothing to do with that. It's looking at it completely independently.
So this is from the U.S. National Library of Medicine, National Institutes of Health. Okay, we're there.
Right. So this is a big library of articles that scientists from all across the country and the world, in fact, submit to. This is if it's in here, doesn't mean it's true, because science, whatever. But it's a pretty good source.
It seems
that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So now,
how would you go about reading this, Duke?
So yeah, go for
it. I mean, I don't know. I mean, like, I would skim to the bottom. I mean, I'm sort of like interested in the conclusion. Like, all this stuff doesn't quite, make sense to me. But what I can read is this: carbon dioxide poisoning, having a role both as an asphyxiant and as a toxicant, is a rare but not to miss diagnosis. Special attention is needed for pre-hospital responders who should stay alert for the possibility of a CO2 intoxication for their own safety, especially in cases involving dry ice or confined spaces. Okay, dry ice, confined spaces. When confronted with the victim, he or she or they should be removed from the dangerous area as fast as possible, and oxygen should be administered. Without adequate treatment, victims may show acute reduced cognitive performance, respiratory failure, circulatory arrest.
Yikes.
Sorry,
Uh,
I haven't
so
felt those things, but
No. Right.
please,
So a
yeah.
couple of things jump out at me from this right away as I'm reading this. The first one is, um, you know, if you have CO2 poisoning, you know it, right? Like
Mm.
it says rare, but not to miss. Like you just can't miss it because you're going to be having a lot of problems, right?
And it would and I would assume that it wouldn't have it, like it wouldn't just happen in an instant. I think it's maybe
Right.
reasonable to assume that like it's a progressive thing. It's gonna sort of you're gonna start to feel some shortness of breath. You're gonna start to feel,
Totally.
But like this is in a small confined space. I'm assuming like ambulances when you have
Right.
like a doctor and a family and a patient, like everyone, and like, oh my God, they're all breathing in the same space and it's tiny and also kind of claustrophobic. But like how much CO2 is actually being exhaled when you're breathing? Like what is
That's a
the
great question.
composition of air?
That's a great question.
So that's an excellent question. So why don't we figure out, like, why don't we search breathing on Wikipedia?
breathing.
Mhm.
Wikipedia.
Like
That's
Break thing. Oh, breathing.
breathing.
There we go.
Listen, spelling's not my thing. It's like autocorrect is, I lean heavily on autocorrect.
It's all good. Okay.
Okay.
So let's look for, we want like exhalation and the composition. There you go. Number 5.
Number 5. Number
Now,
5.
Yeah.
I'm just going to acknowledge here that Wikipedia isn't the best source, but like,
Totally.
It's a
But
source. It's a
And
source.
you know what? It's not so bad because most things are cited and you can go see
Where it came. That's true. That's
So this
true.
is interesting. Inhaled air, we don't care about inhaled air. We care about exhaled. Exhaled air, 4% to 5% by volume of carbon dioxide. So you're exhaling is 4 to 5% by volume. So now I think we know that, and I think we need to go back to that previous study and see, okay, what is the percentage where it became dangerous, or like how much CO2 can you inhale before it becomes dangerous? Because I think what this person is saying is, okay, if the mask trapped all that air in, 5% of that air is CO2. Is it dangerous to inhale air that's 5% CO2?
Do we think it's dangerous?
Might not be in here. No,
yeah.
I'm seeing it in there. We might have to, let me see if I can find something else.
Maybe you
here
want
we
to
go.
look up. Okay, cool.
I got something.
What do you got?
Here we go. I'm dropping it in the chat. And here's another scientific article, and this one is talking about low-level exposure. How much can you breathe? Did you get it? Did I paste the wrong one? No, it should be another article. Science Direct. Yeah, there we go. So this one is talking about low-level. How much can you breathe? Now, there's an interesting thing here. This is parts per million, ppm.
Where are you? Where are you at? Where are you at? I gotta see this.
I'm looking at the highlights. I'm looking at the highlights.
Highlights.
At the very top. The very top.
Oh, it's the top. Okay, cool. Highlights. Oh, here we go. Right. Summary. I love a summary. Summary's good.
Right.
Okay.
So this is saying here's the percentage where you can see some effects for short-term exposure. Right. Now it's talking parts per million, right? But we can do the quick calculation, and 1,000 parts per million is what? 10%. Right, 10% composition. So what this is effectively saying, I think, is, if you're exposed for a short term to even 10%, you might have some problems with cognitive performance. But our exhalation is 5%, way less than actually, only half that. And we're not exposed to it for all that long. And you have to imagine too that a lot of that escapes through the mask and so on. So even if you got a perfectly airtight mask, the most you could breathe is 5%. And if you're just going to the grocery store, doesn't seem to really be a problem.
Okay, wait. So let's just do
I actually have a question about.
Yeah,
this
go ahead,
because,
Emily.
I'm suspicious. When was this article written?
Great question. We should have started there.
It seems like it was in Environment International in December 2018. December 2018.
Right. So I think and excuse me just to I wanted to gut check myself here. What I'm kind of understanding here is that from the first kind of article, what we saw was that we saw that there's potential carbon dioxide poisoning, that it does exist, and that it happens in cases where you're like in a tiny room, or there's like a dry ice situation where you're like getting tons and tons of carbon dioxide.
How often is one in a dry ice situation? I mean, Halloween,
Well,
maybe, but like,
I don't
okay,
know.
I'm going to put the dry ice aside for a second. I'm going to focus on the tiny room. But yeah, please, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Sure, that's fine. And then
Okay.
like it seems like at that point we're talking about very high levels of carbon dioxide. And it's probably over a consistent amount of time, not like for any short amount of duration. And then we know that from like breathing, like naturally, you're exhaling about 5%
Yeah.
of carbon dioxide. And now we're kind of at a situation where we're talking about, being inside for a long period of time. And this is saying, Arthur, what is this? What are you getting from this again? And how that
Right.
follows?
So
Yeah. Just break down some
math.
simple. Yeah, just give us some simple math, just quickly.
Yeah, I got my math a little bit wrong. Here's what this is saying, right? So this is saying when you're in a room and there are 1,000 parts per million of CO2 in that room, and you're in it for a short amount of time, 1,000 parts per million is actually not 10% or 10%. It's 0.1%. It's a very small amount actually, and you can start to see some effects. But and so that's worth digging into, right?
So I'm in a room and there's people there.
Room,
I'm getting some CO2 exposure just by being in a room,
right,
but very small.
And you're going to see some effects at even small amounts of CO2. So I think this is worth actually digging into more and saying, okay, what do those effects look like, and are we placing ourselves in these situations, in our daily lives?
Well, I'm thinking about this, like, don't we have like meters in our houses that measure this kind of thing? Like,
interesting.
Like carbon something meters. And
Carbon
like,
monoxide? Is that what we're
oh,
talking?
sorry, not carbon dioxide meters. Okay,
Right.
those are two different things. So I was about to
Oh,
say,
that's
like,
funny because I said
what if
carbon monoxide. Is that would kill me with carbon?
that would kill you?
That's
Okay.
different.
Carbon dioxide is different. So if you're
Okay.
having a big house party in a New York City sized apartment, the fact that you're not all passing out dead is probably a good indication.
Fair.
But I actually found this like article because I was thinking about like small spaces and like a lot of exhale, and I found this article about cars and carbon dioxide, and basically it talks about the relatability of like carbon dioxide and people getting tired when driving.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And this was done before COVID. Like this
Yep.
is 2019, and it's like a Swedish car manufacturer, and they're like, people get tired when they drive, and the air quality in a car is bad. And like when you go on a long trip with all your friends, everyone's asleep in the back, and you're like trying to stay awake.
Oh yeah, I mean, just the other night I was driving with my head out the window because I was trying to stay out of. I should have pulled over, but I turned the music up really loud. But I did roll the window down. I stick my head out the window.
Yeah.
Just for what it's worth. So yeah.
Look at this. I mean, so drowsiness is a problem here. But I mean, look, it has some numbers that are comparable, like CO2 levels reaching that 1,000 parts per million. But then after a 20-minute car ride, it's getting up to 6,000 parts per million. So can you help me, Arthur, like break that down? Like that seems like really freaking high.
I mean, that is pretty high. So again, I think 6,000 parts per million, that's 0.6%. To translate that. But again, it's tough to compare parts per million and percentages, because what we're saying in this case is a totally enclosed space. We're breathing out a lot, and all of a sudden 0.6% of the air in our car is carbon dioxide. Now our exhalation, right, is 5%. And so what this is actually saying to me is the mask issue probably isn't there, right? Because if think about it this way, if there's like 3 or 4 people in a car and you're breathing out constantly for 20 minutes, the highest concentration you're getting to is 6,000 parts per million, right? That's high. That had some cognitive effects for that other study, very, very minor ones. But like, your mask is not airtight, right? And you're just one person. And so how much would you have to breathe out? How much air would that map have to trap, trap right near your face to get anywhere near the amount of CO2 that you would get?
Right, like even if I could take
closed space.
Right, like even if I could take 3 of my friends and put them all into my mask with me, that even
right.
that even is sort of questionable
Exactly.
of whether or not I'm going to get the CO2 exposure. But like,
exactly.
let's assume that I can't do that.
Are.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think the point for me actually though, like just to like, because I'm trying to make sense of this for myself. Like I've never second guessed being in a car. So like one of the quotes here, I just saw scroll, if you could scroll up, it says numerous research studies have shown that right there, that carbon dioxide diminish cognitive abilities, reduce response times, and impairs the ability of an individual to take strategic decisions. And what's interesting to me though is that it puts it earlier on in the article. It says, according to this to a study conducted, this is what you were saying, Amelie, with
Mhm.
4 adults in one car reached 1,000 ppm, and then and it kind of shows you like I've never second guessed for a minute being in a car
Yeah.
with 4 adults. I can't even count the number of times I've been on road trips with 4 adults in the car. What's interesting to me is and I don't know if you can scroll back to one of the articles we were looking at before that put it in ppms, because it'd be interesting to see if anyone has said, oh, it's at 6,000 ppm, these are the symptoms.
Is this where we
Yeah.
were?
So in that other article, the effects of level, that one, there's actually an awesome table if you scroll down
Nice.
that shows the effects at a bunch of different levels. So we can look at that.
And I'm also a little curious, like, what's the comparison between wearing a face mask, like how many parts per million of carbon dioxide is in your mask versus in your car versus in your dry ice, like Rager at Halloween?
I'm never having
Totally.
dry ice at a party
So-
ever again. That's for sure. That's one takeaway. Yeah.
But so I was trying to say this earlier, but it's tough to say, right? Like there are studies, a bunch of studies on this that have happened since the pandemic, and so we want to actually just sort of say, okay, just to be super cautious, let's think about it logically, think about it before the pandemic. Again, your mask isn't airtight, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to breathe. Otherwise, surgeons wouldn't be able to operate. So a lot of what you're exhaling, is definitely escaping the mask. It's just escaping through the sides, and big particles of spit are getting trapped. That's why it's good to wear a mask in the first place so you don't transmit the virus, right? And so what we're saying is your mask would have to be as airtight as a car, and you would have to have 4 people inside of it to reach the levels that you would reach with 4 adults in a car. And you'd have to do it for 20 minutes. So you run in the grocery store for 5 minutes and put on a mask, nothing. 20 minutes, nothing.
And just and just like in a car that has some circulation, I'm sure there's some things that are like, put in place to sort of circulate the air. Like a mask is not airtight. It's not
exactly.
It's there's some circulation happening. I mean, when I put my hand in front of a mask and I blow, air goes through it.
Yeah, masks, like any face mask you buy has a filter, like a filtration layer that allows air to pass out of it. So it's not airtight. We know that. So like, let's go to this chart though, because this is cool. It says for 1,000 ppm, cognitive performance, decision making. So this seems to track with the other article about the car. Like there's similar language here.
Yeah, and yep. Keep going. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, not at all. It just seems like it seems like very minor. But then when you get to 10,000, it seems like fast breathing.
Yeah, decreased exercise tolerance. But even like 50,000 parts per million, we're talking many times over what you get in a car. Even that, it's like confusion and maybe some indigestion, right? The really bad stuff doesn't start until 80 to 100,000 ppm, right? So even if you reached car levels in a mask, not much going on.
Are there any studies of like how much CO2 is in your mask?
So it's funny, I just found this one, which I'll
go for it.
Hang.
The other thing, just to sort of, before we jump over there quickly, I just want to point out, it's like, it's also just sort of clear that if you are experiencing CO2 poisoning, you're gonna know. And I know we talked about that sort of earlier, but like I drive in my car and I'm being exposed to CO2 just by being in a car with other people, and I don't feel sick. And so there's a lot of validity, I guess, in just sort of the lived experience of like, do you actually feel sick? Do you feel shortness of breath? Like there's a lot of science here that we're talking about, but it's also just like, if you have CO2 poisoning, you are going to know, just like I should have pulled over and like taken a nap instead of sticking my head out the window. Like if you feel it, you should just, Okay. So let me just go, let's see where we are here.
And that extra article about masks in the chat.
Yeah. I got it. I also got like, we're running out of time. Okay, well, so we'll get there. We're almost done. I think we're like, I feel like I'm coming close to something here.
This article was written in when? 2020?
20.
So, it makes me a little bit skeptical just because, we're in the time of COVID and maybe there's some heightened awareness around studies. So that does give me a bit of pause, but like, I think what's interesting is like this notion of breathing zone and the air tightness of the mask, which is something we've kind of been talking about.
Oh,
Yep.
so this is
That's
basically this is some research on exactly what we're talking about.
Right, but it says like I found this
Highlights.
that says doing office work and standing still on a treadmill each resulted in carbon dioxide concentration of however much. So like
2,000
Well,
parts
yeah.
per million.
Where?
So, like, if you go down, it says the concentrations of carbon dioxide while not wearing a face mask vary from 500 to 900. And then doing office work and standing still on the treadmill each result in these other concentrations. Is this while wearing a mask? I mean, it basically looks like
Yep.
that's not as much as you get when you're driving a car.
Yep.
Like the car is like 6,000 parts per million, and this is like 2,000 parts per million while wearing a mask and like
And on a freaking treadmill.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Like
So like being in a car with your friends has more CO2
without
than
a mask.
without a mask than wearing a mask.
Yeah, so basically living
And
your
we-
life
and-
exposes you to some CO2. I mean, that's the sort of gist of it.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay, so I want to go back to the
yeah.
initial question.
Okay, sorry. Yeah.
No, don't apologize.
No, I feel guilty.
The initial question was, does wearing a mask cause oxygen deprivation to the brain and cause you to rebreathe carbon dioxide? I think we can say to that there is carbon dioxide that you're going to be inhaling.
Yeah.
You kind of said that looking at, surgeons or people that wear it for a long time, we're not really dealing with oxygen deprivation. But, we these articles haven't said categorically that you can't rebreathe carbon dioxide. So I think we're saying that, there is some carbon dioxide rebreathing, but it's certainly not more than you would experience on a road trip with 4 friends in a car.
Right.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I want to come back to one other thing too, which is that this person, we haven't gone into this, and I don't think we're going to have time to, but they also bring up bacterial pneumonia. And I think we can put that in the same category as oxygen deprivation, right? If wearing masks for a long period of time caused bacterial pneumonia, like we wouldn't have surgery, like surgeons wouldn't be able to do their jobs because bacterial pneumonia is a horrible condition that's, chronic and can be really long lasting. And so why would anybody become a surgeon? There's just no way throw that in the same bucket as oxygen deprivation. We can roll that out basically with logic, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, couple things. One is, maybe stay away from dry ice. That's my
dry ice is fine. Just don't stick your head in a bucket of dry ice.
Don't stick your head in a bucket of dry ice. Yeah.
It's fine.
Don't be in like a room with like a lot of people breathing very heavily for a long period of time, which sounds awful and horrible to me. Anyway.
Right.
No, it sounds like most of my Saturday nights.
Yeah. Whoa.
Fine.
But
I don't know, common sense, right, dude?
Totally.
Wear a mask, take a break. That's my takeaway.
Say more about that. What do you mean?
Yeah.
Why take a break?
It's like, look, it's like, my takeaway on this is I'm going to feel it. I'm going to really, if I'm getting CO2 poisoning, I'm going to know. I think the fact that we, are exposed to CO2 when we're driving with our friends, we're on a road trip, we're breathing in some CO2, that's real. It's like, it is not black or white. This is not a binary thing. It's like we are exposed to CO2, just living our lives and wearing a mask, but it's not enough that's going to make us sick. But if we are concerned about it, like if it is an issue, like for me, like my takeaway from this is like those moments where I want to take my mask off while I'm riding my bike. It's like, that's probably a good idea at certain points. Just take a little break. So the idea is like, I want to, wear a mask, but if you are concerned about it, you're probably going to know if you're getting CO2 poisoning. It's probably going to hit you pretty hard. But like, based on what we talked about, my takeaway is like, it's totally cool to wear a mask. If you don't want to wear a mask all the time, or if you are concerned about some like prolonged high levels of CO2 exposure, then like take a break every once in a while. Just breathe in some sort of fresh air. And you're probably still going to breathe in a little bit of CO2 when you're breathing in the fresh air anyways. Yeah. So, it's like wear a mask, take a break.
I love that. And I also would say, I've heard this rumor and this kind of rhetoric as well before, and it like makes sense, especially for like my friends who have small kids. They're worried about, I saw an Instagram influencer who was all saying like, I don't want my kids to wear masks because it's going to, the CO2 inhalation is going to screw with their development. And I'm just like, dude, do you take your kids on car rides? Because
Right.
that's hurting their development
Yeah.
more than wearing a mask is, if that's your logic behind this. So I would just say, yeah, like wear a mask, take a break. And in the same way that you're on a large car ride, maybe like get out of the car on occasion.
Open the windows. you
Yeah,
know,
certainly don't
something.
stick your
Yeah.
head out the window while you're driving. That's for sure.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
I think that like what's interesting to me is like almost all of the sites that we looked at just now, or the resources, are like pre-COVID. And so the thing to
Yep.
me is, why is this a concern about CO2 and masks like propping up? And what it leads me to believe is it's probably more around the anxiety around the situation of COVID as opposed to the CO2 buildup in masks. And that's like interesting to know. Like carbon dioxide poisoning exists, but what we're looking at here is that like the concern about it as far as it relates to wearing a mask is like, less than being in the car. And so therefore it seems like, maybe the anxiety is coming from the situation that we're in as opposed to the actual dangers posed by doing this thing.
And also the fact that it can be really uncomfortable and
Totally.
you
Moist,
know, like
moist.
moist, wet,
Yeah.
moist waste product, and that's totally reasonable. But
Yeah.
you know,
What-
you got to
Look-
wear it.
Look
You can
out
take
for
a break. If
Yeah.
it's getting uncomfortable, go somewhere else for a second where you're not near people. Take it off. Take a couple breaths of fresh
Yeah.
air.
Wearing a mask is not going to make you sick, but
Yeah.
It might give you acne apparently, but we can sort of talk about that another.
We talk about that next
Yeah.
time.
Yep.
All right.
Sounds good.
Care
See ya.
regimen. So wear a mask and take a break.
Wear a
Sounds
mask,
good.
take a break. Bye, y'all.
guys.
That was
See
fun.
y'all.
All right. We did it.
All right.
Oh, we
Yeah, it
did
took
it.
a while to get in the groove.
Sorry,
but
my
that's fine.
reminder, Rosie.